Thank you, Madam Chair, and Vice Chair Shelby, and thank you for chairing this important hearing and for your personal engagement in traveling to Texas and to visit with those who are serving our country and to hear from the stories of individuals, children, and adults who are part of this extraordinary humanitarian and refugee crisis on our southern border. I think the evidence is clear that the children who we are seeing and who are being interdicted at our southern border at record numbers are fleeing dramatically increased levels of violence in 3 Central American countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. And if this increase in refugees coming to the United States was caused by some change in policy, we would see a comparable flood of refugees from other countries throughout Central America, but we don't. It's just these 3 countries. And it's because of conditions in those countries, as your testimony suggested. So it's my hope that a significant share of the investment and the action that will be taken as a result of this emergency supplemental will focus on those countries. As a member of the Foreign Relations Committee, I was pleased to see Secretary Kerry and Vice President Biden personally engaged, making visits with the leaders of these countries, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about the intended increased investment in the 3 countries of focus. And as a Judiciary Committee member, I also just want to comment that I'm pleased this requests additional badly needed resources for immigration judges, for an expansion of the legal orientation program, for counsel for minors, because while we know we have a significant backlog, we have significant unmet detention costs and humanitarian costs, I think we need to act now to fix our most urgent problems rather than removing the basic due process protections embedded in the TVPA, a law that was adopted unanimously by Congress and signed into law by President Bush. So thank you to our 4 witnesses for being here, and I look forward to working with you. First, Ambassador Shannon, if you could you just give us more details about the $300 million State Department request and what your plans are for in-country processing in these 3 countries, for a comprehensive approach? What is the baseline funding requested in the state foreign ops appropriations, and why is it not greater? And then second, if we can, if both you and Secretary Johnson would speak to the media campaigns. It's a very modest amount of money. In my view, perhaps more is required to ensure that parents understand that their children are most likely not going to be granted the opportunity to stay in the United States. Only those few who are genuine refugees will have a chance for asylum, and the majority will be deported back to their countries of origin. Ambassador Shannon.
Well, thank you very much, Senator. I appreciate the questions and appreciate the opportunity to respond. Let me start with the public messaging campaign, because that has obviously been a focus of the President, the Vice President, Secretary Kerry, Secretary Johnson, Secretary Burwell, and our embassies in Central America as we attempt to deal with the misinformation presented by the human smuggling networks, but also to start a larger debate about migration in the region. Because as noted, this is an unprecedented phenomenon in terms of the composition of the migrants. To have children leaving in these numbers we've never seen before. And as we've dealt with our public messaging, we focused first on the danger of the journey, secondly on, as Secretary Johnson noted, that there is no pass to get in, that one does go into deportation proceedings, independent of the outcome of those proceedings, and that within this supplemental, we are making a request for money that is designed to accelerate those proceedings and ensure that there's timely handling of these cases, especially of children who do not have international protection needs. However, that said, it's important to know that our public messaging campaign is not just our campaign. It's also a campaign that the government of Mexico and the governments of Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador have joined. In fact, the first ladies of those countries have visited our southwest border, have met with their citizens that have come across the border, especially the children, have used those opportunities to communicate directly back to their countries and especially back to mothers and fathers in their countries, but also in the migrant communities that exist here in the United States, to highlight the dangers and to highlight the misinformation that the smugglers are providing. We are already spending about $2 million in this public messaging campaign that President Biden announced during his trip to Guatemala several weeks ago. And within this supplemental request, we're asking for $5 million for public diplomacy. Part of this is for our public service announcements and additional public engagement, but a big hunk of it is actually going to be focused on the community of returned migrants, so that they, in their own communities, can begin to talk about what happens to them on their journey. I'm sorry.
Ambassador, I'm out of time, but if you had a brief response about, are we doing enough in these three countries
we need to
produce
do
stability and security?
Yeah, we need to do much more, obviously. I mean, we have, through our Central American Regional Security Initiative and through our bilateral assistance, addressed some of the issues related to violence and economic development and job creation. But the $300 million will allow us to focus on a few new areas, but also accelerate work that we're doing. But this will be a down payment.
Madam Chair, may I add to that, please?
Yes.
Senator, public messaging is critical here for the reasons Ambassador Shannon said. When I was in Guatemala 2 days ago, it was a rather awkward moment, frankly, standing next to the president of that country, telling his citizens, don't come to our country because if you do, we will send you back. And it's dangerous to do this. But the public messaging is critical. Ultimately, I believe that in addition to the public messaging, the population in Central America and the parents up here who are thinking about sending their kids need to see that we're sending people back.
Thank you very much for your testimony.